I remember saying about 2010 that Wikipedia's level of bias is something that I would compare to the New York Times or the BBC. So it's very clearly has a left-wing tilt.
I guess not a former, but the co-founder of Wikipedia, Larry Sanger. Larry, how are you?
Good. Ex-founder.
Yeah, ex-founder. I'm going to pop you right up there at the top.
Yes.
Larry, thank you so much.
I feel once a founder, always a founder, though, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Indeed.
Well,
you would think that. Jimmy Wales sort of started denying that I was founder after he released 3 press releases saying that I was. So, I'm just embracing that now that I'm not really a fan anymore. So,
well, okay, let's back up and preface all this. First, thanks for joining us today.
Sure.
Give us, everybody, like a quick tweet background on your history with Wikipedia.
Well, I knew Jimmy Wales back in the 1990s due to our, at the time, shared interest in Ayn Rand. I don't think either one of us really is into Ayn Rand anymore. I was getting his feedback on an idea for a website that I had. And he said, no, don't work on that. Come in and start Nupedia, Nupedia. I said, okay, that sounds like a cool job. I'll do that. So I started Nupedia.com for Bombus, and it was moving very slowly. And so a friend of mine told me over dinner on early 2001 about wikis. And basically, it occurred to me that this would solve the problems that we were having with Nupedia. The people who were behind Wikipedia, the editors and so forth, they didn't want to have anything to do with a wiki. So we launched it under a separate domain. It was initially Wikipedia.com. It was going to be for profit. But basically there was an uprising among the masses so that it became nonprofit. Not that I regret that. In fact, I was happy about that. So
you were there at the very, very beginning.
Oh, yeah. Well, I started it. It was my idea.
Yes. So, okay. So how long before, or how long after you were there did it take for you to depart?
Basically, a year after I got Wikipedia started, 2 years after I developed the community that became Wikipedia in 2000, basically Bombus lost its big funding contract, which I think was with Google, and I'm not 100% sure. And so they had to lay off all the new hires, of which I was one. And I didn't want to stick around and like devalue my professional labor. So I quit. But in the following year, in other words, by early 2003, there was what I might describe as a pattern of mismanagement. Basically, Jimmy Wales allowed some very problematic characters to essentially get the run of the place. And we've been, dealing with the aftermath of that ever since, really. So I just washed my hands of it. I'm not going to have anything to do with it. And I kept my word. I haven't, except as a critic.
Right. Naturally. So for a little clarity, what was the original mission statement of Wikipedia? Or was there a mission statement or a goal?
I don't know that we had a mission statement per se. I guess a tagline we seemed to use a lot was the encyclopedia anybody could edit. Yes, I think, I don't know who said it first, but I remember both of us, Jimmy Wales and I, saying that we were building essentially a repository of all the world's knowledge, something to that effect.
So, obviously that's a big mission. And I think for
Yeah.
everybody here has used Wikipedia. And it's one of the most trafficked websites literally in the world, right? And
Sure.
I think for a lot of people, it's served as their, the idea of a traditional encyclopedia like doesn't exist anymore. Like when I was in elementary school and middle school and high school, I was taught to go to an encyclopedia. And now like that's such an antiquated version of how to get information. That information is dated, and that's what makes Wikipedia, what made Wikipedia so resourceful for people. But things
There's
have
a lot
changed.
of good information in old encyclopedias, though. It's true. It's carefully edited, and certain facts, by their very nature, don't change. Opinions about what the facts are can change, unless there is new data that informs our judgment of what the facts are. But it really depends on the subject.
Or new opinions.
Right. Which
of
is
those who control.
Right. And that's kind of where we're getting to now, where there's this almost attack on knowledge, or this idea, it's this attack on truth, right? The idea that now we don't have a truth, we have many truths. And
Yes.
we are seeing this, well, at least there's this portray that there's many truths, right? And you see all sorts of, Wikipedia has certainly changed. We've talked before. My brother, Brad, 5 times August, he had his entire Wikipedia page edited and ultimately removed because he wasn't deemed, worthy or at the time because he had a wrong think.
Yes.
And
yes, he suddenly became non-notable.
Yes.
So there's a notability policy. You have to be adequately noteworthy, essentially, in order to merit a page. And this is supposed to be determined based on whether any articles have been written about you. But because the sources, the acceptable sources, the list of acceptable sources has shrunk, they've gotten rid of all of these, alt media, what we might call alt media, but just basically conservative leaning media. Those sources are no longer allowed. That means that suddenly the people who are not talked about in the left-wing media are no longer noteworthy.
Well, that brings us to Katherine Mayor. Are you familiar with Katherine Mayor at all? Do you know who this person is?
Yeah. Well, I have never met her. I know that she was the CEO of Wikipedia, now of NPR. She was the CEO for a good while, several years. And I retweeted some video clips of her.
Right. Well, let's get to one of those clips. This was posted, and I just want to get your thoughts on this. Obviously, this is from Elon Musk, but this is just get her thoughts about abandoning a free and open internet as the mission of Wikipedia. Let's see what you had to say about this.
Right.
I started by talking about the idea of free and open as some of our founding principles, sort of free and open source, coming from the idea of the open source community. Well, I have come to the opinion and the perspective that free and open was a way of looking at the world that was inherently limited relative to what we were trying to achieve. Free and open has the best of intentionality, but in the end, what free and open often ended up doing, and particularly in the case of Wikipedia, was really recapitulating many of the same power structures and dynamics that exist offline prior to the advent of the internet. And so what we ended up seeing was Wikipedia really rebuilt this idea of knowledge as a whole around what the Western canon. You see the exclusion of communities, of languages, because of the ways in which Wikipedia is based on reliable sources. The idea of a written tradition is something that is particular to the idea of a written tradition, which is particular to some cultures and not to others. The ways in which we ascribe notability often really comes from sort of this white male westernized construct around who matters in societies and who is elevated and whose voices. And so some of these ideas of sort of this radical openness really did not end up with the intention, really did not end up living into the intentionality of what openness can be.
All right. So there's a lot there. Sorry.
Wow.
Just your overall.
It's laughable. It's so absurd.
It is. It is. Well, I think that it's just amazing to me that she is actually finding reasons to come out against the free and open nature of Wikipedia. That's what it was built on. That's the very nature of Wikipedia itself. And basically, if she really took that seriously, then she would be repudiating Wikipedia itself. And she, basically, she seems to be saying that, okay, we started with a productive idea, but it rebuilt this idea of knowledge as a whole around the Western canon, and that's bad. And so now we are changing that. So it's no longer free and open, she implies, right? She implies that. And we are now getting rid of all standards of notability based on the Western canon, whatever exactly that means. And I have to say one other thing on this. She misuses the word intentionality. And as a philosopher, that kind of bothers me. It's just like fingers on a chalkboard. If you've ever take a class in philosophy of religion, you're just misusing the word. But anyway.
So, okay. So obviously this is not the original intent behind Wikipedia. And she's talking about, well, it goes back to now there's many truths. There's many truths attached to this, and whose truth is really accurate, right?
Yes.
You said this goes back to like 2003 when kind of the wolves got in the hen house a little bit. Has this been a slow progress to the point to where now the idea of what, your original, child has become something that you don't even recognize?
Yeah, I would say that sort of the history of Wikipedia's bias has gone in phases. So from practically the beginning, not quite the beginning, but 6 months in, there were some people who arrived and said, we don't really like this thing, this notion of neutrality. It's not really possible. They said that was the big bone of contention. And there were also people who said, we're not going to be unbiased about global warming. We're gonna or evolution. We're gonna just say what the facts are there, right? And I said, well, no, not really. We're going to actually try to represent the full range of opinion on these subjects. Otherwise, we can't have an open sort of project. And I got pushback. But the point is, for the first 5 years, Wikipedia was, for the most part, pretty committed to neutrality. So you could go to articles about global warming and actually find a section about global warming skepticism there. Well, that in particular changed. And so I would say that it abandoned what we call the neutrality policy or the neutral point of view in like 2005 or 2006. It was gradual, obviously, and adopted what I might describe as the scientific point of view. But they still try to be ideologically and like religiously neutral to a great extent. Then that kind of changed, I would say, toward the end of the aughts. I remember saying about 2010 that Wikipedia's level of bias is something that I would compare to the New York Times or the BBC. So it's very clearly has a left-wing tilt, but it still also tries to maintain some standards of at the time, because those have changed also, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but they still try to have some standards of fairness and nonpartisan neutrality. Then things really went off the rails, I would say, around 2015, and especially with Trump and Brexit, basically. When those two things happened, basically, Wikipedia fell in line as if it were taking orders from the same people. I'm not saying it was, right? But as if from the people who guide the mainstream media. So when I thought of it like this, I thought it was really strange back in about 2015. It seems like all of the media now is acting like Fox News and CNN. Because on Fox News and CNN, there were a lot of opinion channels, right? And that had been the case for the previous 20 years. And then suddenly, they were all opinion channels and all opinion all the time after a few more years. And Wikipedia, it just fell in line with that. And
Google made a whole shift in 2016. They changed their algorithms, and you look at Google and how big that company is, and that was just one of the giants who made this statement: we can never let Trump happen again.
right.
And
Right.
looking at what this woman said, it's kind of a small little speck compared to what all of these companies are doing with hate speech. It's getting rid of free speech. It's getting rid of free thought. People being able to decide for themselves what the truth is by taking different information. They can't have that anymore. It's this battlefield that we're seeing on the internet. Because of the internet, people are able to reach out to different creators, different sources to find out what the best information is for themselves. They don't have that power that they had where they had three media sources. That Fox News, CNN, BBC, they had these places that everyone just got their news from. Well, it's a different world nowadays. And it feels like they're going through the death throes right now. If we either going to get a hold of control of the information or they're going to lose it completely. And everyone's going to just go back to individual sovereignty. And I think we need that. And we're witnessing it right now, this battlefield. And that's why they're going crazy with these decisions here.
Yeah.
They're holding on to the information. Now, you said that around, what was it, the early 2010s is when it first started to
start leaning.
I don't know if you know about this, but in 2012, after Obama won his second term, one of the things that he did that would begin in 2013 was that it eliminated the propaganda ban out of journalism. And it was
the Smith-Mundt Act.
That's it, right?
Well, it didn't pass, but they snuck it into the National Defense Authorization Act in 2013.
Yeah. And by doing so, that pretty much allows journalism to no longer be journalism, because after World War II, they wanted to stop the propaganda that was basically saying, here we are fighting the Germans and we're fighting the Japanese. So they wanted to put an end to propaganda. But then 2013 is when they, like you said, what was it called again? It
was the National Defense Authorization Act, and they tried to pass it on their own with the Smith-Mundt Act in 2012, and it didn't pass. So they snuck. It was in page 1200 or some crazy, deep into this National Defense Authorization Act in 2013. And it basically allowed all of media to just what? We sent propaganda out to the other countries. Since the Cold War, they wanted to be able to lie to other countries, but you weren't allowed to lie to American citizens. But now with the advent of the internet, everyone can get information anywhere.
Maybe you can explain something. I mean, just an ordinary person listening in on this conversation and entering in 2 minutes ago would say, what are they talking about? I mean, obviously, the media
Right.
is not controlled by the military or anything. So can you just like explain, what does this defense authorization have to do with the governance? There's not supposed to be governance in the media, right? You're
Correct.
implying that there is. So let's give me background.
Well, I'll tell you
Oh,
what.
man.
Let me just while Adam gets his background, Larry, you should be a host of the show because this is what we call a reset. If you're just joining us, this is Larry next to me. He is the original co-founder of Wikipedia, and he left the company. We're talking to him, obviously, and about the direction of Wikipedia and where it's at, and mainly information. And Larry, at any time whenever you're ready to go, you just tell us, and we'll let you bounce. But Adam, let's go ahead and fill everybody in on what you're talking about.
I'd love to hear the answer to this, though. Anyway,
You know, some people would say the deep state. Some people would say, the elites that we don't know their names. I don't know necessarily the correct answer. I would say that there's this hive mind thing that's happening, that when we listen to that woman, the CEO of NPR, and that attitude that she has, where we're doing this for the greater good, like we need to control the information because it's morally imperative that we control it, right? She believes it. She believes she's doing it for the good of humanity, when in reality it's funneling us back into this, I don't want to say slavery, but mentally that's where it's heading. And I don't like that. Freedom is very important for the world. We need that. So I think that there's these people that get caught up in this mentality of like groupthink and comfort. Like, we have a society that has spoiled us all, and we don't.
Sure.
A lot of people don't think about it anymore. How easy life is, how tough it used to be, to what we have it now. Like, man, we've got it good. Life is fantastic, and people get comfortable, and then the ad companies cater to that comfort, and now we just want our comfort zones, and I feel like it's just gone too far. So
Yeah.
who wants to control the information? Why is Google saying we can't let Trump happen again? Which is essentially saying we can't let freedom happen again. We can't let these people move closer to individual sovereignty. And I think that's really like the key is like individual sovereignty. We need that, as we need to become sovereign again. We're not anymore. Like, someone else controls everything. And I think that, to answer like who is behind like the National Defense Authorization Act, sneaking in that Smith month provision into that bill.
Well, the question is actually, what is the mechanism whereby, or what are the mechanisms whereby they exert this control? If there is, I mean, what I have heard is that, and we've actually seen, for example, in the Twitter files, that there are a number of different federal agencies that exert control over like social media, and there used to be, at least, and maybe still is, a certain project where again, government agents would essentially censor certain stories in journalism. What was that called again? That old program?
Paperclip.
Paperclip, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
CIA has been doing this for a long time. There was a commercial that came out in 2020, a recruitment for the Army, and they were saying like the battlefield isn't fought in the field anymore. It's fought in the mind. And it was essentially talking about PSYOP war. And it was a recruiting commercial to get people to like join up. Like, come join the PSYOP war. Like, that's how we fight now. And it's like, wow. It's all about PSYOP. The CIA has been doing mental control stuff for a long time. and
Yeah,
using
and
that idea.
if you are right, and I'd love to read an expose of this with the adequate data, evidence, and so forth.
Sure.
Assuming that it's right, then of course it's reasonable to think that the same thing would be happening on Wikipedia, because why wouldn't it be?
Exactly.
You know, I mean, yes, but still, these sorts of things should not be legal, in my opinion. The government should not be in the business of attempting to control people's minds. It's not their business.
Facts.
Okay.
These are facts right here.
Okay. Yeah.
I agree.
Well, and this goes back to, the importance of like Wikipedia, right? This is something that everybody here has used.
The original Wikipedia, the core of what Larry started.
Right. But what I'm saying is that nowadays, when like my kids go to school and they will Wikipedia something, that knowledge is being twisted to fit a certain narrative, right? And ultimately, by them repeating that information that they get from Wikipedia, that is creating possibly a different truth than what has happened, maybe a different perspective of reality to fit a certain narrative, which ultimately that will then become the narrative. And
Right.
what was there before would be seen as problematic or not accurate or whatever it may be.
All right. It'll go down the memory hole. I mean, this is exactly, what George Orwell talked about in 1984. And along these lines, I'll leave you with this. And I'll need to get off here, but
Sure.
I'm now the head of something called the Knowledge Standards Foundation, and we're essentially trying to create a network of all the other encyclopedias, not to like unify them under like single management. That would be bad. We're not trying to do that. We're trying to collect all of the free data, make it all available in a common format, have multiple different nodes of basically information sharing of encyclopedia articles. But to show the sort of general power of the idea and to scratch the itch that you're describing there, something that I'm going to do for those who contribute to the Knowledge Standards Foundation is I'm even now making software that will fit on a 128 gig drive that will put all of the articles sorry, not all of the articles, all of the books in Project Gutenberg on a flash drive. So like 70,000 books, you'll be able to search them, read them, like bookmark them, browse by the Library of Congress categories, and so forth. So this is the sort of thing that, like, okay, if it's on this drive, then at least as of 2024, that is that is what we believed.
Right.
And the other thing is, it makes use of our file format. So the Gutenberg files were zipped up and digitally signed by a volunteer. And so I've taken these zipped versions, and that each one of them can be proven to actually have been created at a certain time. So, and this is actually going to be increasingly important, the whole idea of digital signatures and digital identities. This is why people talk about this now, in order to essentially fight against the people simply lying about what documents might have said in the past. You will have to, it will be convenient at least to be able to prove that that a document was created by a certain time in the past. So anyway.
Well, if anybody tuning in would like to check it out, you can go to encyclosphere.org. Is that accurate, Larry?
That's right. That's right.
Cool.
Encyclosphere.org.
There you go.
Great.
You can go over there and check it out. And Larry, we genuinely appreciate you coming on and talking about where are we going there? We're and talking about everything today.
Sure.
Any closing remarks before we go?
Yeah, well, I'll reiterate something that I said in a recent blog post. You can look on larrysanger.org, and I have a few posts promoting the Encyclosphere project, which is the network of encyclopedias that I was describing before. There is something actually meaningful that you can do that will actually help the world if you're really concerned about this problem. If you think that Wikipedia has become, completely biased and unreliable, the reason why it has as much authority, or apparent authority, as it has, the reason it's accorded as much authority as it is that it covers what's called the long tail of all the obscure topics. In many cases, even still, it's the only place you can go for an article on an obscure topic, or on a topic that is, or rather, an article that is really long and meaty. It's like the only one online that you can find that is really in depth. Okay, so here's what I'm proposing to the people watching this. You're probably a reasonable expert on something, and why not write an article about that and put it somewhere else? It will be available, not just via EncycloSearch and EncycloReader. Those are I wouldn't call them meta search engines, or collections of encyclopedias. It should be available via those sources, but it should be available via Google, actually. Google will still surface stuff that people put on blogs if it's relatively meaty. If you've got a meaty introduction to the causes of the Great Depression, for example, that corrects Wikipedia, there's a chance that it's going to rise up, especially if it's actually good. Now, I'm not saying that Google doesn't manage this information, but they can't manage all of it, at least not yet. They haven't gotten so completely, ridiculously biased, not completely, that you can't find important things, especially in the long tail. That's what I'm saying. So basically, if the rest of the world were writing articles in all of the other encyclopedias that were fair-minded, neutral, or just represented other biases that were in other respects just as high quality as Wikipedia's, then we really wouldn't have as much to complain about. So.
All right. Well, Larry, we appreciate your time today, man. And thanks for hopping on with us, and look forward to catching up with you soon. Thank you very much for your time.
All right. Thank you.